This is the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast. I'm Andrew Savage, and Nancy Richards is off at a community meeting tonight. So it's just me, but I am joined by a fabulous guest, Dr. Joseph Frusci. Uh,
Yes.
and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. This is I'm an avid fan of the show. I enjoy what you guys are doing. I really love the title of the podcast, Left in the Forgotten Borough. Pretty cool.
Yeah, but somebody else commented on that too. I think it was Dan Goldman, Congressman Dan Goldman, when he was on, he said, "This is the best titled podcast I've ever seen."
It's true.
Um, so I wanted to talk to you because you are a professor of history, you're a teacher of history like I am, and you are also very knowledgeable and steeped in the history of free speech. And free speech is something that has come up a lot lately, especially given the last week with Jimmy Kimmel and his suspension and then return. And uh, I was just wondering, and you wrote a really insightful article about just the case law behind free speech. Oftentimes, free speech is thought of as the First Amendment is the First Amendment, and that's it, not realizing that there have been challenges over the years to those things. Administrations of all kinds have tried to infringe upon free speech in many different ways. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, like yourself, I'm also a teacher of history, and some of the case law that I went into, these are cases we talk about in AP US history or even a junior level regular non-AP history course. We discuss these cases. So many students at 16, 17 years old have the understanding of what free speech is and what free speech isn't. And I can't even begin to tell you some of the pushback that I received from this article when I posted it on X, on Facebook, shared
Oh,
it out on my platform, The
you're
Average
on
Joe.
X. You're on X. I'm so sorry. That's
I'm on it.
terrible.
Yeah, you have to be, I want to be seen out there. So I'm on every platform. You can find me. Just go to my website, theaveragejoe.org, and you'll see a link to all my social media platforms that I'm on. And yeah, I take the conversation to places where I find it would be uncomfortable for people that aren't sharing far right conservative thoughts no longer. And just to be clear, I myself was a Republican for many, many, many years. I joined the party at 18 years old. Left the party at around 2011 when the Tea Party movement had a lot of steam. Because for me,
Mhm.
it was no longer the party of Reagan or Bush 41 that I had I really respected of the party. And I felt those men would be spinning in their graves when they'd be seeing what is now happening today. And let me just give you some of the pushback because I have some of my notes here on some of the comments I received and certain questions. So, in posting my article, one of the comments or one of the questions I should say that I was asked was, "Where's the evidence of coercion?" And I can't tell you the logical fallacies that people will put out there just to kind of back the actions of getting someone off air who speaks an opinion that is different from theirs. Because remember, what is free speech? Free speech is not meant to protect the speech that we're comfortable with, right? It's meant to protect the speech that we are most uncomfortable with. And, unfortunately, here we are. But anyway, one of the first questions or pushbacks I got was, where's the evidence of coercion? And that right there is what we call the burden of proof fallacy. Now, if we go back to the Supreme Court case, Bantam Books v. Sullivan, and just last year, NRA versus Volo, these cases made clear that the violation is the threat itself. We don't need a paper trail showing Disney acted only because of Carr. The implied threat, which came from Carr, and he's on a podcast
Oh yeah,
saying this.
he was pretty. I was going to say he was pretty open about it. He wasn't. It was in plain view. So, like, what do you need? Do you need like step-by-step instructions? Do you need a manual? Do you
Right,
need a guidebook? What do you need?
right. And, so he's on that podcast saying, look, we could do this the easy way or the hard way. And if you go back to listen to Ted Cruz, who I rarely agree with, but the funny thing about Cruz's comment, did you hear his full statement on that when he was on record?
I try not to listen to that chode often, but for me, I did hear what he had to say about this, and the gist of it was, that it was a mafia style,
Yeah.
uh, it was a mafia style way of doing things to get Kimmel off the air, and that it could be turned on them one day.
Right. And although many people just took his comments at face value and said, "Oh, thanks Ted for speaking up. We appreciate it." But if you dig deeper, those comments don't it's more self-interest than it is principle, right? Because he's saying, if we allow this, Democrats are going to do it to us. Not saying you can't do that. That goes against your First Amendment rights.
Yeah, well,
So
I found Rand Paul's response to the question more a matter of principle
it was, yeah,
on his end. I think he was on one of the Sunday shows, and he had said that we shouldn't be doing things this way, essentially. But he didn't caveat it with, "Well, they'll come after us one day," at least
right,
as far as I can remember.
yeah. So, a second claim I heard was, if ABC really valued Kimmel, they wouldn't have suspended him. And that right there is just a red herring. The First Amendment isn't about whether corporations value employees, it's about whether the government uses its power to intimidate speech, which we directly saw from Brendan Carr. Third comment I saw was, unless someone brings a lawsuit, the issue is moot. And I think I saw Janine Materna bring this up in a
Oh
response.
God. Oh, she was so disingenuous. And she's somebody I've defended for a long time, even though the party, I'm a Democrat, and she was a Democrat at one point, and then she turned into a Republican, I
Yeah,
suppose for political expediency, for to make it easier for run to run for office on that
yeah,
side of the island. But and so I defended her when people were mean to her when she was running, but she was so disingenuous when she said, "Oh, well, it's a private company. They could do what they want." When clearly this is very different. Clearly
very different.
their
And
thumb is on the scale here for sure.
yeah, and I know when I had posted my so I think someone shared my article, and you had posted Janine Materna should read this. So I started
Yes.
laughing.
I
I
said, well, I
said,
think, yeah, I said, please explain this to her because,
yeah,
I don't know what fucking law school she went to, but and Sonia Sotomayor said that if anybody is justifying criminalizing free speech in any way, she always says that that law school failed.
right. And that right there, unless someone brings a lawsuit, this is a moot point. That's just an appeal to futility, right? Constitutional rights don't disappear just because no one sues. The chilling effect on speech is harm, and the courts have recognized this for decades, just in the last few cases we've had, and the one I referenced in my article with the NRA. Uh, Fourth, when cornered, some will say, well, my point was just that people don't always have free speech the way they think they do. Something else back to
Yeah.
Jinju. And
Well,
that's just
and
moving.
under normal circumstances, I agree. I mean, a lot of people, of all people, one of the double standards that's, they're trying, or false equivalencies, I should say,
Yeah.
that they're trying to draw is what happened to Roseanne, because Roseanne was on ABC.
Right.
And yeah, and I said, well, Roseanne, nobody from the government said Roseanne had to go. That was a
Right.
decision that they made internally.
Yes.
And so it's a very different thing. And it's just, I just the level of gaslighting uh is unbelievable because uh they know that this is not right. They know that this is a sort of a state sanctioned censorship that they're attempting to do here. And they just come up with all kinds of rationalizations and twist themselves into pretzels to
Yeah.
really to really make it sound better than what it is.
You're absolutely right. And, that right there is just that's moving the goalposts. Those comments where, well, they don't think people think they have this free speech that they really don't think they have because they're misinterpreting it. And this debate was about Carr's comments and whether they crossed the constitutional line. And that's exactly what they did. Now, as you said, if ABC decided, look, Kimmel's contract is coming to an end, the ratings are low, we don't like what he said, we're going to pull him off air. That would be a different story if this guy, the FCC chair, did not make this statement publicly, because now it just puts it all out there for everyone to see.
Well, it does, I mean, what other way could you possibly interpret when he says we could do this the easy way or the hard way,
Right.
and then he proceeds to bring up their broadcasting license, not to mention the fact that there's a merger before the FCC right now of the local affiliates, and
Yep.
that they must approve, and so
Yep.
it's not subtle. It's not
It's
subtle.
not. This is just like Nixon being on tape trying to cover up a crime. It's right there in plain sight. So another claim I had seen in response to my article was that falsehoods aren't protected speech. And I think now, first off, what Kimmel said, if we go back to what he said, MAGA was trying all weekend to prove that this shooter wasn't one of them. Okay, we can debate is that poor taste or not. But I think one thing we can all agree on is that that's not a lie. MAGA, that whole crowd was saying and trying everything to highlight how this guy was not MAGA. And I'm not saying he is or he isn't, but I'm saying the actions of that group are pretty, they were pretty straightforward for me. I don't think that was a lie. So for Kimmel, being accused of falsehoods aren't protected speech, that's just a flat misstatement. If you look at the United States v. Alvarez, the court affirmed that falsehoods, standing alone, are still protected unless they are fraud, defamation, or incitement. Kimmel's words were just political commentary, which the First Amendment protects most strongly.
Well,
Last,
and Donald Trump actually is guilty of all of those things: defamation,
100%, January 6th, you know?
incitement, yeah, uh, and and they use the First Amendment to defend that whole debacle by saying that, well, he actually believed he won. Well, he was told many times by his own people that he didn't. And so
Correct.
it was not like, oh, well, I just have my head in the clouds and I don't know and I don't believe. He was told many different times that he won. And so the First Amendment there is not really a legitimate leg to stand on.
Yeah. And not only was he told his claims were wrong and he lost, you have all those people through the January 6th investigations doing their depositions. They're all on record telling the president, I told him there was no fraud, or at least there wasn't fraud to the level that would change the outcome of the election.
Attorney
Uh,
General Bill Barr told him it was bullshit. He said it was
yes.
bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can't make this stuff up. But the last one, the last statement I got was when this was all out there, their argument shifts again to where corporations just aren't agile. So Disney couldn't have acted based on Carr's podcast remarks because it only came a few hours later. Well, that's just speculation masquerading as fact. None of us know the exact timeline in Disney's boardroom, but even if Disney had already made the decision, the constitutional violation remains by Carr, and the threat itself is the violation. So if you look at all of these defenses, they share one common thing. They're dodging the real issue. They dance around it with fallacies and distractions, but the First Amendment principle is simple. When a government official tries regulatory power to punish uh, political speech, that is coercion. And coercion by the state is exactly what the First Amendment was written to protect.
Exactly. And somebody else on the right that I think had a genuine view about this that didn't come with the caveat of, well, they're going to come after us next is Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan
Yes,
actually said that, this is stupid to have anybody in the government regulating any part
right.
of free speech. And so, and the Federal Communications Commissions, this was meant for broadcasting license. This was meant for more reasonable regulation of the TV market. But it was not meant to be used as essentially a secret police. The next thing we know, we're going to have Caroline Levitt on there giving us state TV, North Korean style.
Yeah. Do you listen to the Pivot podcast?
I love the Pivot podcast.
What does Kara Swisher call her? Calls her Tracy Flick.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, my thing with Kara Swisher the last few days is she called Brendan Carr the dickless Brendan Carr.
Yes. Yeah. You know, I really love. I've been following Kara Swisher for such a long time because I'm very big in the world of IT and cybersecurity, and she started as a tech journalist, and she used to do this program, this live Q&A with this guy by the name of Walt Moskovich, I think his name was, and it was called Recode. And she would be questioning people like Mark Zuckerberg, who she's openly said she doesn't really like. And it
Yeah.
goes back to her days as questioning him on how he handled data and all that stuff. And yeah, so she got her start there, and I love what she does with Prof G. Really good.
Yeah. Well, I love everything she does. She's one of my favorite snarky lesbians. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but she's fun. But yeah. So just getting back to the First Amendment, um, one other thing I've noticed ever since the Charlie Kirk murder, which nobody, including on our podcast, Nancy and I talked about that rather extensively. We did not we did not condone that. We condemn that. We spoke unequivocally against it, and uh, we said that political violence has no place here. But uh, I've just noticed that uh, there's an effort to sort of go Goody Proctor on folks who may have a different opinion
Oh
and
yeah,
rat them out to employers and to, ruin their lives in some way. And then again, they always use the gaslighting, oh, well, you canceled us, so now we're going to cancel you. But this, of course, has the stink of the state all over it.
that's right. That's right. So to kind of circle back, we were discussing before the podcast started about this would be we're coming up to 2 years now. I had written a letter to the editor at the Staten Island Advance, and this was just as George Sanchez. We all remember him.
Santos.
Santos. I'm sorry, Santos. George
If that's even
Santos.
if that's not even if that's even his real fucking name, he
If
lies
that's
about
even his real
everything. Yeah,
name.
right, yeah.
Right. Anyway, he when he was getting thrown out of Congress, he had called out a few Republicans that had voted against him who had endorsed him in his election. Now, if you remember, Nicole Maliotakis, our congresswoman, had endorsed him and he won. And then everything came to surface as to who he really was, or at least what he was lying about.
Hmm.
And he called her out on her private life, her sexuality. In
Right.
addition to that, called her out on her quote unquote the alleged insider trading that she does. And that was not the first time that had come out. If you go back, I believe, to April of that year, so April of 2023, the Wall Street Journal broke an article about a bunch of people in Congress on both sides of the aisle. This was not singling out a political party, how they are privy to information that you or I would be prosecuted on if we use that information for financial gain.
Right.
Essentially saying these members of Congress were engaging in what looks like insider trading. And her name came up. And the reason why her name came up was because if we go back to Signature Bank, or was it Silicon Valley Bank? I'm sorry, Silicon Valley Bank was holding a bunch of toxic assets, all related to crypto and stuff like that. And they went belly up. So when that happens, the Fed Reserve cannot step in and bail out a failing bank. They have to orchestrate one bank to bail out another bank. So what they did was they orchestrated Flagstar, which New York Community Bank is under. Flagstar bought up the toxic assets of Silicon Valley Bank.
And it's alleged
And
that Nicole knew all of this.
yeah, and I'll get to that in a second. So with this, when the announcement was made, the shares in Flagstar, the value of their stock jumped. Now, where does Nicole Maliotakis come in on this? Nicole Maliotakis sits on the Ways and Means Committee, and a good friend of mine works as a senior bank examiner at the New York Fed, and he said they knew days prior, before it was announced that Silicon Valley Bank was going to fail. They get the alert. And when they get the alert, that's when behind the scenes work starts happening to try and mitigate this fallout and have one bank absorb the assets of the other. And who sits on the Ways and Means Committee? Nicole Maliotakis. There's a very powerful committee as it relates to things like financing, accounting, fiscal policy for US Congress. And as a result, she made a purchase in Flagstar Bank, I believe just 48 hours before the statement went public that they were buying up the shares of Silicon Valley Bank. A bit shady. Now they have to file a form saying every time a member of Congress is going to buy shares, her slip that she filled out was filled out incorrectly. It was filled out by her spouse, apparently,
She
but
didn't have a spouse.
exactly, she
Yeah.
doesn't have a spouse. So there are a bunch of red flags there. So anyway, back to me, how I get tied into this is I write my letter to the editor talking about her alleged insider trading, saying, look, this happens across the aisle. It's not just her, Nancy Pelosi. There are apps that track Nancy Pelosi's stock trades for anyone to do.
Yeah.
So I called her out on that, but then I defended her on the attacks against her personal life. Now, at the end of the day, I don't know what her personal life is. I don't care what her personal life is. I've never even met her. However, in my own family, I have people that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. And I found that attack by George Santos, who himself, I believe, is a gay man.
Hmm.
Uh, I found that wrong. You don't bring someone's personal life into public discourse like that. Those ad hominem attacks are just used when you've lost your argument and you have no other leg to stand on. So I defended her on that, and my article was published, and then I shared it out on social media. Well, as it turns out, her chief of staff at the time, who was no longer her chief of staff, who I like to call her glorified office manager,
Right.
he responds saying, it just looks like I'm an adjunct hack for hire.
Hmm.
Not long after this, I get an email from legal counsel at CSI saying I need to meet with them to discuss the proper use of my title. I was unsure what that meant. So maybe a week or so later, I meet with legal counsel, and I was not reprimanded in any which way. There was no letter put in my file, nothing like that. But I was told that when writing a personal opinion piece, my letter cannot be signed Joseph Frusci, adjunct associate professor at the College of Staten Island. Now, at first, I wanted to push back on this, saying, well, Paul Krugman, who is a distinguished professor of economics at the CUNY Graduate Center, he has a column for the New York Times, or he had a column at the time for the New York Times. And some of his titles were pretty provocative. One was, Why is the right trying to destroy America?
Yeah.
And he would attack certain elements on the other side of the aisle. And CUNY never once told him, hey, you can't write that and tie your title to it, because at the
So
end of
she,
all his op-eds,
so she Goody Proctored you. She called up your
Goody
employer
proctored me.
and she said, I heard him, say these bad things about me, and how dare he, and you should do something about this.
Yep. So when I sat there, they said, listen, you can write whatever you want to write. Just make sure your title isn't there. Now, when I send letters to the editor, I never send it with my title as far as where I work. I've never sent it from my CSI email address. However, one of the teachers in my school that I'm very close with, her husband is the breaking news editor at SI Live, who
Hmm.
I know fairly well. A number of former are students of mine now work at the Staten Island Advance. I'll go to Flagship Brewery and see Tom Robluski and his wife, who writes for the New York Post. And I've seen Tracy Papora, who I tried helping to get an adjunct spot in the English department at CSI, who, by the way, her nephew was my former student at CSI.
Oh, see,
So
Staten Island is just so incestuous that way. It was just
it
so
is.
the
It's
tangled
two
web.
two degrees of separation.
Yeah.
So yes, in a nutshell, that's how they know me. So when they see my name come across, which is not a common name, they're like, "Oh, we know this guy. He sends stuff in all the time, and this is who he is." And oh, that's my former professor. I know exactly who he is, and that's it. And anyway, the meeting lasted no more than 10 minutes, and then we just started talking about other crap on Staten Island, and that was the end of it.
Did it have a kind of you've written things many times over since then, but I was going to ask, did it have a kind of chilling effect on you for a little while at least?
So most people say, you know what, let me not write certain things, calling her out anymore. I took the opposite approach. I
Mhm.
said, you know what, screw that. Now the gloves are off. Okay, my title won't be there, but now I'm not holding back, and I'm going to make it plain as day when she is lying or she's doing something that's hurting her constituents, which she's done with the big beautiful bill, and trying to remove people collecting social security from having to pay the payroll tax, just all the implications of that the average Staten Islander does not see, and they're just not aware of. They don't understand the implications of it. So,
And conveniently, conveniently, all the cuts that were built into that bill are not designed to go into effect until after the midterms. And so,
correct.
yeah, and so that is so that was another kind of sneaky move on their part. And but she's been since trying to gaslight the entire district into thinking she did us some huge favor. Like she's going off, oh, she was at the Staten Island University North as if she didn't just vote to cut their funding.
Right. She's literally smiling in their faces while stabbing them when they, sticking the knife in their back from behind.
Yeah.
And I don't understand. This is a conversation I had with Troy McGee, who is trying to obtain the Democratic nomination for Congress here, trying to run against her. But yeah, so anyway, the gloves came off, and now I'm not holding back. My title's not in it. No one knows where I work if they're just reading the letter to the editor, and that's it. And she has responded on more than one occasion publicly and has called me out in her articles or in her responses publicly. So to me, to have some,
Which she has every right to do. She doesn't have any right to go after your job for
oh,
it.
100%,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
But I look at it as here I am, according to her former chief of staff, an adjunct hack for hire is now getting her to respond. Who am I? I'm a nobody. And I'm forcing her to respond, which she can do, and you're 100% right. But now she's naming me. So she's giving credibility to me where she doesn't really have to, but that tells me I'm hitting a nerve.
Yeah, and it's but it goes back to a broader, I think, uh, a broader free speech question. They have always accused me, the right, has always accused us on the left or in the center left of trying to cancel them or
Right.
trying to, and in some cases that's been true, but a lot of time, but I don't remember a single instance where the state got involved and put their thumb on the scale for any left-leaning cause. Now they'll say that it's that Biden tried to intervene with social media companies about COVID misinformation and about election misinformation. The best I can tell, those were light suggestions. Those were light
Yeah.
suggestions, and even this Supreme Court said they did not violate the First Amendment.
Right. And you know what? I go back to this episode of the Joe Rogan podcast I had listened to with Mark Zuckerberg on, who made the claim that they were getting calls from the Biden White House to take this down or, limit the visibility of certain posts that were, I guess, unpopular to what they wanted to do as it related to COVID and the vaccine. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. I'll take him at his word. Fine, they did. But as you pointed out, has the Supreme Court said that was a violation of, an attack on their free speech? I don't know, but
They
it's funny,
they said the opposite. They said it wasn't, but
right?
they said it wasn't. And I don't remember any mandates. I don't remember any regulatory agencies coming down on them the way the FCC is trying to do here. I don't remember any arm of the Biden administration saying we're going to shut down any comment of Fox News, which was promoting all kinds of bullshit back then and
Right.
still does. But I mean, so it's a very different standard. So they take something that's this big on our side and blow it up here and then draw the false equivalence.
Yeah. And look, they're very good at playing the victim, right? That's what Trump does very well. He plays victim very, very well. It galvanizes his base. But, I look at just the comments by Brian Kilmeade just a week or so ago, talking about euthanizing the homeless if they don't comply with certain orders. You're talking some real Nazi shit there.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
they're not subject to the same FCC rules that I guess ABC is because they're a cable news network. But I mean, come on, there's to say that one of the arguments I heard was, well, he apologized, so it's okay.
Well,
Okay,
okay.
I don't know how. So if Hitler apologized, that's okay.
Well, yeah, well, he apologized and then, but I mean, And there were some distasteful tweets on the left about the Kirk murder for sure.
Oh
But
yeah,
I'm not calling for those people's heads or their jobs. I saw Laura Loomer was doxing people and doing all kinds of
yeah,
crazy stuff. And it's just a very, Salem witch trials vibe, very McCarthyist House Un-American Activities Committee sort of
yep,
vibe. We're
yep,
being insufficiently mournful of who they see as kind of a martyr.
yeah, yeah. We're really headed back. In fact, Ezra Klein just did a great podcast talking about,
The blue
is this
scare,
McCarthy?
the blue
The blue, yeah,
scare.
you
Yes,
so yeah, we
I
just
listened
listened
to
to
that.
that.
Yeah.
Is this McCarthyism 2.0? It kind of looks like it when you have, a list of professors who are speaking bad of Charlie Kirk. Just it's craziness. I do tell my students first day of class, both at the high school and at the college, you know, your politics, your politics. You're never going to know my opinion, and that's not
Yeah.
my job as an instructor. It's your job to read the material, discuss, debate, and argue for your position in a in civil discourse, a way in which you can hear the other side, agree or object to, and come back with a rebuttal in a very respectful manner. And yeah, we've kind of gotten away from that. We shouldn't be, just because the other side thinks differently, you can't hate them, and you can't, of course, shooting and killing them is it's horrendous. That's horrible. And don't take the human aspect out of this too. I watched the parts of the Charlie Kirk memorial that they did. It looked like a MAGA rally with a grieving widow,
Oh,
and they were
please!
selling.
It looks like it was WrestleMania with those pyrotechnics.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
yeah.
I mean, it looked like a grift. That's what it really looked like.
Oh, it did. It absolutely did, and we'll probably get canceled in docs for saying that, but it's true. Um, and you also, in your article, uh, touched upon the various aspects of case law, and you talked about it a little bit before, but um, like when somebody is saying this is free speech, but this is not, or this is hate speech, the way that Pam Bondi said a few days
Right,
ago, and so we're going to go after quote hate speech.
right.
And like, what would be the case law that you would tell people to read up on to, really know what their rights are as far as free speech is concerned? The First Amendment is the First Amendment, but these people don't seem to care about that.
Yeah, they don't care. I would just say a good starting point is going back to the cases that I outline in my article. The New York Times v. Sullivan, which starts with the court, upholding the fact that even false statements about public figures must be tolerated to ensure robust debate. I go back to U.S. v. Alvarez, where the court reaffirmed that falsehoods standing alone are still protected unless they constitute defamation, fraud, or incitement. So I would say, you can say what you'd like so long as you are not engaging in defamation, fraud, or incitement. That's where your hate speech crosses that line to where your words are potentially giving harm to other people. Another one is I went back to Bantam Books v. Sullivan, and this is now on the other side of it, where even implied threats from regulators are just unconstitutional. So even if your speech, hate speech or not, if it's not rising to the level where you're not defaming, inciting violence on someone, your speech is protected. And the Supreme Court reaffirmed that in Bantam Books v. Sullivan. And in the most recent case that I mentioned, the NRA v. Vollo, it's, and I'm going to just quote Justice Sotomayor: government officials cannot attempt to coerce private parties in order to punish or suppress views the government disfavors. That right there, to me, that is reaffirming the true doctrine of what the First Amendment is. So I would say anyone who wants to really, really brush up on what the First Amendment is and how it truly applies to American society and law, start with those cases.
Okay, that's terrific advice. And uh and if we're talking about the First Amendment, I think it's really important to note just that tech has a really important role in it. We were talking about Kara Swisher before, and I went and saw Kamala Harris last night. I went to her book
I
tour.
saw the pictures. How was
Yeah.
that?
It was fun and it was good to see her, and I got to be transported into a world where we had a decent, normal, sane president for a couple hours, and it was nice, and she was, even there were some protesters there who were vocal about the Gaza issue, and she was very respectful of them, although she did get out of her seat and like confront one of them from the stage.
Yeah,
Uh, and the one that she confronted was sitting right behind me, so I was sort of in the eye of the storm there. But one of the things she said, it was a question that came from the audience that struck me. And she said, it was like, how do we balance and how do we navigate the presence of social media in our lives? And I feel like that has led to a lot of the impulsive posts about Charlie Kirk on the
yeah,
left that, has gotten people into trouble. And she said something interesting. She said, if something comes across your feed, that evokes an emotional reaction, don't assume that it's coincidence. As-
right.
Assume that it is designed to do that. And so,
Yes.
what do you say about navigating that balance of free speech, but then also recognizing, yes, you have a right to say whatever you want, but maybe be less impulsive about it?
Never. I tell my students this, and sometimes I have to,
I need to
remember my
adhere to it too myself. There are just memes that are too funny not to share. Like, I mean,
right, 100%.
yeah,
And I also have to remind myself of my own words when I fight with my fiance, where your first reaction is usually going to be out of emotion. Don't do that.
yeah,
Do not make that first reaction. Take a minute, sit, think about it, and then respond. Ask yourself any questions. Am I going to be putting something out there that is valuable, or am I just playing into the rage baiting that's happening? Because look at where our society is today. Rage has become an industry, right? Social media, people prior to social media, you could have disagreements with people, and you would not really be siloed into your own echo chamber. Whereas social media today, people will find their echo chamber that just reaffirms whatever thoughts they have. And the more that's reaffirmed, as crazy as some of those thoughts can be, you wind up down a rabbit hole, I think, of just hate. And I think it really brings the worst out of people. So the advice I give my students, and then I have to take myself, is never act on emotion. When you see something, just take a step back, breathe, read it, sit on it for a couple minutes. One, you don't always have to respond. You
yeah.
know, a response isn't always warranted. So pick your battles there. And if you choose to engage, I would just say, engage in a respectful way. You're dealing with people that, at least from what I see, that do the rage baiting. They're the whole owning the other side crowd, or they're the fuck your feelings crowd. And if you understand where it's coming from, that too will help shape your response if you choose to respond.
Yeah, and I always thought, I like his recline, I like his show, but I disagreed with him when he said that Charlie Kirk was practicing politics the right way, because I thought a lot of those college debates, I only saw a few of them. I try not to, I didn't want to touch them because then they would just keep coming up in my algorithm.
Yeah, it's gonna affect
And
your algorithm, right?
yeah, I didn't want that. And so I saw one or two of them, and it just seemed to be smug. It seemed to be like to own the libs. It just seemed to be um very much about, as you said, owning the other side. And it's not really that's not a respectful dialogue. That's not a
Yeah.
respectful dialogue. And so not and of course what happened to him was horrible and it shouldn't have happened. But I just didn't think that those debates were, people are making him out to be Socrates because he went to a couple of college campuses and owned the other side.
And look at what he does. He goes to campuses, which now I'll give him credit for. He goes to college campuses and he engages in debate. But then that's just surface level. If you were to dig down and truly see what he does, how he debates, because I love researching logical fallacies. I love the idea of debate. I love watching debates because I love to hear what people bring to the table. And I've noticed with Charlie Kirk, and go back and to those who are watching, just go to YouTube and type in Charlie Kirk Cambridge debate team, and you watch him debate a bunch of Cambridge students. And let me tell you something, those students come prepared and they have receipts and they are well trained in the art of debate because it truly is an art. And a question will be out there, or he'll the student coming up to the microphone will ask him a question to get his response. And what he does is he kind of navigates the talking points in the conversation to where he wants it to go. So he'll respond with another question to get the student or his opponent to answer and then debate that. Typical straw man stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so are you truly, truly good at debating? Are you really getting to the heart of an issue? Or are you just a culture warrior trying to just argue for, your talking points to
It's
kind of
trolling.
have
It's
those to
trolling.
trolling to get those gotcha
Yeah.
moments, and that's it. That's not true debate. It's just
Yeah.
trolling.
Yeah, and I did see, I don't know why I do this to myself, but I watched the Jubilees where they have one
Yeah.
person surrounded by, I don't know, 20 other people who are different, and it's just, oh, it's so brutal. It's not designed for a genuine conversation. It's really just
Yeah.
designed for those viral moments, which it makes it spectacle. It makes it entertainment. It's not actual dialogue.
I agree with you. Yeah, I saw that one. I like to watch them. I just want to hear some of the arguments that are justified because I do appreciate when whichever side kind of gets cornered, what they default to. Like what's your way of thinking to where now, okay, I'm caught, I'm gonna pivot to this.
Yeah.
Just from a mechanical point of view, I like that side. But did you see the one with Mehdi Hassan?
Oh, I did. He's very good at that kind of thing. He's
Very
he's,
good.
he's excellent at that. I remember he cornered Sarah Palin not too long ago, and she just sort of melted down. She fell apart.
Yeah. And he had an interesting take on Charlie Kirk. And he said, this is a man who told me I should be thrown out of the country. A man who is an American citizen,
Yeah,
you know?
the one who said I should be stoned to death too, as a gay person too.
Exactly, exactly. And it's funny. One of the students at Cambridge kind of came with that dialogue from the West Wing. Do you remember when President Bartlett in the West Wing saw a woman? I believe it was the second season, and it was a woman who had a radio show where she
Oh,
called.
it was the Dr. Laura inspired episode. I remember that.
Yes, yes,
Mhm.
and he quotes certain verses in the Bible. So a student brought that, and it was just very interesting to hear Charlie Kirk's response, to which he did not have a response. So, or his response was all over the place and very incoherent.
Yeah, and one of the things I think a lot of people are worried about, and I said this yesterday we did a collaboration with the Grice Report, which is another podcast, and I said I'm most concerned that something like the Charlie Kirk murder, aside from the human element of it, it's terrible. Somebody was shot, and the
Right.
family is grieving, and the other side, as much as we may not like them sometimes, is still very much grieving. But I also worry that it's a pretext
Yeah.
for cracking down on free speech. We saw today that George Soros's organizations are being investigated now. We see just the kind of stuff we were talking about earlier with people getting doxxed and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'm worried that it's kind of, is this our Reichstag fire moment?
I
What do
was
you
just about to say that. Is
yeah.
that where we're at?
Is that where we're at? I don't know. Some days I feel like that, and some days no, not so much. Because the one
Yeah,
thing, one thing that's the saving grace about these people is that they're so fucking stupid. Is that they are just
they
so
are.
fucking stupid, and that's actually, I think, if anything's going to save us, it's just their own ineptitude.
Yeah, it's what are we in a cacistocracy? I think it is. We have some of the most, talentless people running things, and they're taking talking points. Like Trump takes his advice on who to fire from the NSA from Laura Loomer.
Hmm.
Who is Laura Loomer? Like she's a nut job. And the fact that these people have the president's ear and they're affecting policy changes or personnel changes, not good. And yes, I think over time, uh, their inadequacies are going to come to light, but I think it would be for the whole country to see it, or at least a majority that matter who vote. I think the damage will hopefully not be irreparable by that time.
Yeah, and in addition to their ineptitude, one thing I am hopeful about is that people, at least when it came to Jimmy Kimmel, push back. And they push back not just by saying they were pushing back, but they canceled their subscriptions.
Yeah.
It was reported that over the weekend they lost 4 billion, I think, in revenue over this.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think that's the way to go from this point forward is just to show them with our wallets because nothing else seems to be working. Shame doesn't register with them anymore.
I agree.
Any kind of moral high ground, argument is done, I think, unless it impacts their bottom line. They're not going to change course at all, and that's the only reason why. And as far as Jimmy Kimmel himself is concerned, I was surprised he even agreed to come back. I was like, you could anybody could now, he has the audience, he's got the platform, he could go to Substack, he could do
Yeah,
YouTube, he could do his own thing and he would be very rich. I mean, the best thing that ever happened to Don Lemon was CNN firing him because he does an excellent
right.
show now.
Yeah, no, I agree. Um, it's funny. You do have to hit the bottom line. And, even Disney's decision to bring him back was, in my opinion, just a pure financial decision. As you said, the 4 billion they lost. Who knows how much they would have lost if this became a lawsuit and then an actual court case to where they're found liable and have to now pay him out of his contract plus some. Yeah, it just became a financial decision for them. I don't think Disney was sitting on any morals there. They just decided it would cost them less to bring him back, take the hit of whatever cancellations they had. Maybe they'll claw some people back than it would have been to just have this really be dragged out over the long
Yeah,
term.
and I was listening to another podcaster I really like is Molly Jung Fast, and she was talking about the fact that this is corporate censorship. This is because Brendan Carr made his statement, and then a few hours later this happened. There's no evidence of a directive necessarily to shut this down, but it was just them obeying in advance,
Yeah,
essentially. As it was them obeying in advance, and so I think the people in this country, I think they turned that corporate censorship around and said, well, we're not going to pay for a company that's going to engage in these fascistic tactics.
yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. Again, it comes back to the financial side of things. But yeah, Molly, is she the one who has the dyed hair in the front? I think I've
Yes,
seen, yeah, okay. I
yes.
know who she is. Okay.
She's like a mess, but I love her.
She's a,
She's like a mess, but I love her. I aspire to be her one day.
okay. I listen to I like the Bulwark with
I love them too. I like them
Tim
too.
Miller and Sam Stein. I like those guys a lot. They're pretty good.
Yeah, like them too, and all through free speech, all through that's one thing that people really like, and I'm surprised that I'm not surprised, but I guess that's the thing that breaks through. The Epstein files, I think, is still an ongoing story. It could have a drip, drip, drip effect, but that really kind of died down in August after a month of Epstein in July. Uh, the cuts to the services through the big beautiful bill, nothing seems to have broken through except for this. And so, except for this, because people
Yeah.
like to say what they want to say.
And you know what? When the effects of the big bullshit bill are seen and felt, the sad part is because of, as you've highlighted, a chunk of this is going to come to light after the midterms. So they're assuming the GOP is assuming they're going to lose the House in
Well, they're
2026.
trying to. That's why they're trying to rig it and gerrymander it.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. And then should they lose the House and then the effects of that are really felt from the big bullshit bill, they can just point the finger and say, well, who's the party in power now? We told you this is
Yeah,
them's fault. And the way, most Americans don't understand the legislative process. I'll never forget when Trump's tariffs started going in a month later, you had people like Joe Borelli on CNN talking about how, look, these tariffs are in a month or two and we don't have inflation. Everyone was wrong, not realizing that takes time to work its way through the supply chain. And now, if you look at the numbers, I wrote a blog about this not that long ago. Certain corporations like Johnson and Johnson have now started passing that cost onto consumers. So Walmart is now saying
yeah.
price of
Well,
goods have gone up because of the tariffs.
Yeah. Well, Trump's saying, well, look at how much money we have. Yeah. Well, who's paying that money?
Right,
We
that's
are.
our money. That's
We are. And so
and
it's such a gaslighting thing.
Yeah, and I can remember Republican Party did not that didn't want to add taxes. You've now given us a national consumer tax.
Yeah, and I just think that, and I'm not necessarily against maybe trying to bring some manufacturing back here, but
Right.
But I also think I think anybody with two brain cells to rub together knows that it takes time. It doesn't take it's You're not going to impose a tax and people are going to do it tomorrow. It's going to take time.
Years. I saw the earliest estimate of a factory that's able to be built to produce a certain good would take about 5 years to build the infrastructure for it. Then, put the factory up, hire people, train people, and then have it output as much as we are outputting now. But the question is, you output those goods that are now made here instead of being made in, I don't know, China, Vietnam, Thailand, wherever. The cost of that good will be going up because the American worker just demands more money. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I don't know. Dave Chappelle had a good bit on this a few years ago. This is back in Trump's first term, and he said, want to bring manufacturing back. And he goes, I want to wear Nikes. I don't want to make them shits. Like, I don't
Yeah.
want my iPhone to be $9,000. What are you doing? And there are just certain jobs that, they shouldn't really be here. I believe a lot of the manufacturing got shipped overseas, and then we adopted back in the 80s and 90s in the Department of Ed the ability where every student goes to college to kind of create that higher level workforce. Hasn't really worked out that well, I think, but that was one of the justifications. And of course, cheaper goods. Salaries haven't gone up; they've been stagnant since the 70s. They barely keep up with inflation, and all we haven't seen salaries go up astronomically to adjust for that. What we've seen is just the cost of goods have come down because all the manufacturers have been shipped overseas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Nicole Malliotakis and other Republicans are freaking out over Zohran Mamdani's proposed city grocery stores, and yet Trump is taking 10% of Intel for
Yeah,
the government, and they say nothing about socialism or a kleptocracy, that's really more what it is. It's just kind of a kleptocratic move to me.
I just wrote a letter to the editor about this, talking about how there's hypocrisy. That with which they're accusing Mamdani of, they are engaging in themselves. It's they take, for example, the 10% in Intel, and now taking a sale of Nvidia's chips, taking a cut of Nvidia's chip sales to China as a VIG, so to
Yeah.
speak. They just package it as America first, and okay, socialism is okay in that respect.
Well, socialism, the ideal in its idealist form, goes to, helping people and solving societal problems. It doesn't always
Yeah.
do that, but I think this is just to line their pockets. This is just to skim a little off the top, the vig, as you say, and just the same thing as the Qatar plane, which is kind of a Trojan horse. Kamala Harris said that last night. It's a Trojan horse, and that no gifts are free, which she's right.
You got to ask, what would Malay say if Mamdani was proposing a 10% stake in Intel, a cut of NVIDIA chip sales to China, a cut of universities' patent royalties, which is everything Trump has suggested? What would her response be if Mamdani suggested that?
Oh, please, we already know what it would be. Oh, he's a socialist. He
Yeah.
wants to defund the police. He wants to take all your money and, your guns and, basically just racist fear mongering, which is what she's doing already. I mean, that's what she does best.
Yeah. And not for nothing, I have yet to see a Democrat propose a bill or even vote on anything at the federal level that defunds the police. I have not seen a single thing.
No, I always say the only person who has ever voted to defund the police is Nicole Malliotakis when she voted against the American Rescue Plan, which included state and local
Yep.
money to fund law enforcement. She voted against it. And so
Yep.
and so she's the only one who's done that. And it's a kind of a projection game. Every accusation on their end is a confession of their own behavior and their own sins.
But she will also tout all the benefits of that bill coming to her district. And again, people here, the average person does not understand the legislative process, and they just take her word for it. Oh, she brought this into our district. This is great. When in fact, it was Joe Biden's bill.
Yeah. Oh, it was. It was. And it was Joe Biden's bill. And I remember, in fact, Joe Biden was holding a list. of
That's
named
right.
Republicans who voted against the bill, but were taking credit for stuff, and she was at the top of the list.
Wasn't that during one of his State of the Union addresses?
No, I think that was actually just a regular press conference. What I think you're
Oh,
thinking of was she was wearing the mask and she walked up to him and she shook his hand and it was
yes,
COVID. She gave him her business card. She made it seem like she's reasonable and wanted to work with him. But yet, a few months before, she had voted to decertify his election in two states.
that's right. That's right. And I wrote a letter to the editor then calling for her to vacate her seat. If she truly believed fraud was at the top of the level, it was in rampant form during the 2020 election. Hey, she came into office during that election. Maybe she should vacate her seat then if she truly believed fraud was, very much involved in that election.
Oh, she should, but she won't. And I think that, as much as I love Troy, I would really like to see new maps. I would really like to see the map that the governor originally proposed a few years ago. And if she was really serious about doing what Gavin Newsom is doing, then I think that we really have a shot at maybe, ousting her.
Yeah. It's I see Troy. I had coffee with Troy late August, and very nice guy. Everyone that I know at Curtis High School who knows him and works with him has nothing but great things to say about him. Very stand-up guy. Uh, I would like to see more Democratic candidates jumping in because I want to see a primary process, and I think
Me
having that
too.
primary
Me too.
process
Yeah.
would really get the Democratic messaging out more. It'll be in the news more. People will be forced to kind of see it. I think as it is now with Troy, who isn't really out there as much. I don't. We're only 13 months away from the
Yeah.
election. It's not a long time. I'm not seeing much activity on his side.
Well, I'm seeing activity. I just think it's activity that uh it seems to be preaching to the choir, in other words.
Yeah,
Like people who would not, he's been on our show he's been on our show two or three times already. And so, of course, anybody who listens to us is probably going to vote for him. But
yeah,
I think that I would like to see, I've been trying to get Justin Brannon on. I really want to see if he'll jump in. I really want to see if others may do the same. I think a primary process is good. I think that's part of the reason that people lost faith in the Democrats last year is because for Kamala Harris, she was the next logical choice after
yeah.
Biden dropped out, but there wasn't a process to choose her.
Right. And you know what? I will give her credit with just 107 days, which that's the title of her book, right? 107
Yes.
days. She only lost those swing states, I believe, by 1.5%, which is not it's not big at all. That she came very close for 107 days of campaigning.
Yeah, and he still hasn't broken the 50% popular vote mark, which
Right.
is what he's wanted to do. He still hasn't gotten the popular vote that Joe Biden got.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's something just worthy of note. And I think the Electoral College is DEI for red states, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see where the elections go over the next couple of years. And you're right. If Republican policies were so great, if these were such great deals for the American people, they would not be looking to rig the election by gerrymandering all these different each state to kind of pump themselves with more red seats.
No, absolutely not. And I think, and for some of them, they're juicing like, Missouri is maybe going to get one.
Right.
Out
Right.
of their gerrymandering process. So it's not like and Texas at most, because it's a bigger state, would get five. But I also think that gerrymandered, and we interviewed one of the Texas representatives who left the state to try and stop that. We interviewed her a few weeks ago.
Okay. Yes.
Um, I think that that theory is based on just the idea that, well, the people who came out for Trump last year will come out for Republicans next year. And
Right.
I'm not convinced of that. Trump is able to bring out low propensity voters,
Yeah.
but generic R may not be and probably won't.
And that's a good question. Where does the MAGA movement go once Trump is gone? Uh, does a guy like JD Vance take the reins of that? I don't know.
Takes more
Well,
eyeliner for him, I think.
yeah, exactly. The guy who suggested he wanted to be America's Hitler
Mhm.
just did a whole 180. So I see Vance as just an opportunist. And Vance, that's like what, the second time he changed his name? That's not his real name.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, he's just every time I see him, all I see is eyeliner.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it'd be curious to see where the MAGA movement goes from this. Does it kind of splinter off? Does it stay as it is and be a driving force, I guess, for the voters to come out, the low
When you
propensity
said
voters?
when you said Trump is gone, one of those bubbles came up above my head that was just like it was like the heavens came down and I heard celestial choirs singing. It was you that was a sentence I needed.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see. Time will tell what happens. But as it relates to free speech, I don't think we're done with this. I think there's going to be more issues popping up over the next couple of years where, we as citizens have to really push back and say what you're doing is wrong. The First Amendment is sacred. It is doctrine. It is what makes America great, truly.
It is.
And to,
It is.
anytime anytime someone of authority, any regulator tries to tip the scales and silence people, we cannot have that. The minute we have that, we are no longer the United States.
I couldn't agree more. And thank you, Joe, for coming on the Left and Forgotten Borough podcast. It was a really terrific conversation.
Likewise, thank you for having me. I really I enjoyed it. Uh, just waiting to hear. One thing I hate is my voice when I have to hear myself. So
It took some time. I had to get used to that too. I was like, oh, and I started the YouTube channel a couple of months ago, but I was like, well, I'm too fidgety on camera, and
yeah.
so I'm too fidgety on camera, and I am. I'm noticing it right now. I'm very fidgety, but so it took me a while to get used to hearing myself and seeing myself, and so I was like, oh no, but I got over it. But this is yeah.
Well, thank you for having me. I had a great time.
Yeah, and this is the Left in the Forgotten Borough podcast. I'm Andrew Savage, and we will see you next week with a very special guest.